Christian Straka, how are we doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Gabe?
I'm doing great. What's new in your world, man?
You know, what's new? I guess writing a book right now, so that's definitely new. But other than that, really, spending all of my time around my favorite kind of subject and theme in my life, with this kind of like developing the mind via mindfulness practices and talking about it. So that's why we're here, and explaining it to people who are interested in it, and just diving deeper and practicing myself as much as I can is kind of really, where I'm at.
Awesome. Is it too early to plug the new book?
I think so. I think so. We're like just in the first draft.
No, we'll update the episode notes when we're finally ready for it.
Yes,
but that's
yes.
very exciting. Is this your first time writing a book?
It is my first time writing a book. I have for many years really had this kind of desire to write a book. And I think it's like many people have it, right? Once they are very interested in a subject for a long time, and then they kind of just want to write it down. And in my case, it's about mindfulness and tennis specifically, because I've also played tennis my whole life and been teaching tennis after I stopped playing. And then with a dear friend of mine and former player who has also been meditating really his whole life and has been very successful on the tour. We eventually ended up working together when he won his last world championships in doubles. And now 10 years later or something, we said, come, let's just do it together. So we are through the first rough draft. We have accomplished that, so that's kind of a big milestone. But now the nitty-gritty is kind of where it's at.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this topic today. We haven't had a guest on here yet to discuss mindfulness. Last summer, last fall, I read Andre Agassi's book. I imagine you read it as well. But going through that, I mean, if you were to look at that or read that, or could have used this technique at this point, it could have been really helpful for him here. I mean, that was a really exciting book to read. And he really opened up about the stressors of his life, especially as it relates to tennis.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's a good example, I think, of how what we perceive from the outside that people might or might not be experiencing might not be at all what they actually are experiencing, right? And that obviously doesn't apply just to tennis players or athletes in general. That applies to everyone. We have like this view of people, like how easy things are for them or how great they have it, and they are really having a rough time. And sometimes it's the other way around. People think like, wow, that is like a rough life, and they're actually very content and happy. So like the external circumstances and your own kind of perception of how pleasant or unpleasant your life is might not always match your own opinion.
Yeah. So let's dive into it. First question, it's a simple one, but how do you define mindfulness?
So mindfulness really is pretty clearly defined by now in the Western world from a secular perspective. But I want to preface that with a lot of people use the word mindfulness now, and not everybody means the same thing. That is pretty important to realize. Right. So one has to dig a little deeper just with what do they mean by mindfulness. When you talk about secular mindfulness, then generally you mean three things. Mindfulness consists of three different skills that you are using simultaneously if you are mindful using all of these three skills. So the first skill is your ability to pay attention to what you want for any amount of time, whether it's 1 or 2 seconds or 30 seconds or longer, right? Whether you move your attention back and forth between different things that matter, or you keep it on just one thing, whether you have a super narrow focus or it's a very broad focus, all of that falls into this. If this is what you want to pay attention to, then this is the first skill. And it's just a broad, kind of very broad skill that all falls under the heading of concentration. Okay, but it has very many sub-skills. Mm-hmm. The second one is a lot of times what people think of just mindfulness. And that's like, people call it awareness or presence or being in the moment. You can call it clarity, which is your ability to track in real time what you're experiencing. So you can direct your attention somewhere, and then when you your attention is on it, then you can notice something about it. So you're noticing details. So you're detecting things, and you're also distinguishing things from one another. So this detection and distinguishing skill is awareness. Okay, that's the second skill you're using. And then the third skill you're using, which most people don't even realize that it is a skill to begin with, meaning they don't realize you could actually train it if you knew how, is your ability to be equally open to pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral experiences without kind of suppressing or avoiding what's unpleasant, without clinging and holding on to what is pleasant and being dismissive to what's neutral. So it's like another option to those three, where you acknowledge and allow that experience to exist without fighting it. And if you use these three skills, you are mindful. Everybody has those skills. Everybody's using those skills, but most of the time not intentionally and not in a systematic way. They don't plan on using it. They don't adjust those skills if the skills are not working in their favor, right, all the time. And therefore, over time, these skills don't necessarily improve as much as one would like. But that's where mindfulness training comes in, right? So just because you are mindful doesn't mean you are training it in an effective way. So when you do a mindfulness training, then that means just you have a systematic approach. It's like, okay, I'm going to use these three skills in this particular way to achieve this goal. And that might be good for a tennis player. And for a soccer player, it might be better to train this particular sub-skill in this way. And then every athlete has different predispositions, different talents and challenges. So even though you might be in the same sport and even in the same match, you might have to use the skills differently because you're not the same individual experiencing the identical.
Okay, so recapping here, 3 things in terms of mindfulness: ability to pay attention to what you want, awareness and clarity, ability to track your own experience, obviously having that detection aspect, then also the distinguishing aspect, and then ability to be open to experiences, whether they're pleasant or neutral. So in terms of performance and mindfulness and performance, do you now take these 3 pillars and make them more specific to performance, or does mindfulness mean something different in the aspect of athletic performance to you?
Yeah, great question. So you take these 3 skills, that's always what you do, and now you just need to understand how do these skills apply in your current situation. And if you are a tennis player, then you are in a very specific situation where you need to do very specific tasks, which limits what you need to pay attention to. It limits what you need to notice. What should you be aware of? What is happening to you? And what are the challenges that you're experiencing? And that is what limits the mindfulness practice or activity vastly from being mindful in a way where what most people kind of misunderstand as mindfulness. You're sitting with your eyes closed in a lotus position and you're calming down, or you're doing it while yoga, right? So whatever activity you are engaged in, if it's a sport or you're sitting in stillness, you're lying, you're getting a massage, or it's a sound bath, it's just the activity. How you use these skills is kind of independent from that activity, so you can always use these skills, but if you want to enhance your ability to perform within this activity, then you need to use these skills in only those ways that support your performance. So let's say we go very simple, and you're sitting in a Keiser machine and you are doing a bench press, right? We know about the mind-body connection, right? And a lot of fitness coaches are like tapping the muscles. So what is that? It basically just helps the person that's working out to first direct their attention to the muscle that they should actually be paying attention to the one that they should be training. And now the tapping allows them to more easily detect, is the muscle actually tense, or am I actually not even engaging my chest and I'm using my shoulders too much? So now you are using the second skill. You're detecting in real time which muscle is really tensing up and supposed to tense up, and which one should actually be relaxed. And now the third skill can show up by noticing that, oh my God, like I'm not doing this right. And I'm starting to be frustrated, right? Or in even more simple terms, I'm doing 6-7 reps, and on the 8th rep, I'm starting to be so fatigued that I feel like I can't do it anymore. And now, do I allow this fatigue to be there and the belief that I can't actually do it anymore? It's okay that that's there, and I just continue pressing anyway until I actually cannot do it. Not just because I can't believe it, but because the muscle gives in. And already you're using the 3 skills in this particular scenario. But that's very different than what a lot of people start with, just paying attention to their breath, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think moving forward in this conversation, because you're so well versed in the tennis world, we can use tennis as an example, or draw from the sport of tennis really for an example. But I guess my question is a really simple one, which is, why is mindfulness even important in terms of performance? Again, using tennis as an example, like why should we even care? I'm sure there are plenty of people out there saying, I practice, I am very skilled, my technique, both technical and tactical, are great. What element does this really add to my game? And is it important for everybody, or is there a certain population that really needs this, right? So that's a question for after. But really, why is this important? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, really, to understand by realizing how do you perform if any one of these skills is absent or weak. So let's say playing tennis and you're about to serve and you need to focus on your serve. This could mean a number of things. So let's say you need to focus on where you are supposed to hit the serve, or you're supposed to focus on making contact in full extension. Let's just take one of those two.
Right.
Okay, that's what your focus needs to be. If your focus is somewhere else and you're focusing on the last point instead that you just lost, then your focus is not helping your performance. So that's the first skill. Let's say you understand you need to focus on the contact, but unwillingly you're focused on the point that you just missed. Do you think your serve will be better if you focus on the contact? Or do you think that your serve will be unaffected by you thinking about the past and focusing on it? Or maybe on the audience that is yelling just before your serve, right?
Yeah, I mean, I play a lot of golf, and I'll tell you, when I focus on a shot that I didn't hit well, it doesn't help me on the next one.
Exactly, right? So that's the first skill. You can see, is that skill beneficial to my performance, or do I not need it? Second skill, same thing. Now let's say you are paying attention to the ball, where you should be hitting it, and you need to be aware of it, okay? You need to be aware of full extension. Well, you can be aware of a lot of things. People say this very often, like you need to be present, you need to be in the moment. But essentially that's correct, but it's also not very precise, because you can be aware of an infinite amount of experiences. And when you perform, you need to be aware of a very finite amount of experiences, only the ones that matter to you. So one very common kind of thing that people are unaware of until it's too late when they play tennis, even on the serve, is when there's too much tension. So they're hitting the serve and they might be a little nervous, and because they're nervous, they tighten up. That tightening up just means your muscles are actually a little bit too tense, more tense than they normally are when you're not nervous. So if you now are not able to detect that you are tense, you have no ability to relax. The ability for you to relax your arm, if it tenses up by itself, requires you being able to notice it. If you can't notice it, you can't do anything about it. So, that's the second skill, how it shows up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then the third skill, same thing. Let's stick with the example of being nervous while you're serving. So if you are nervous just before the serve and you really, really have an issue with it, you don't want to be nervous, and you believe that you can only serve well if you're not nervous, and you're trying to get rid of the nervousness, of the feeling of anxiety, then this feeling will have a bigger impact on you. It will draw your attention. And you're kind of in an antagonistic fighting relationship with this feeling. And by fighting it, it is distracting you more. It will be much more difficult to pay attention to the ball and relaxing if you're also the whole time in a basically kind of struggle with your feeling of being nervous. So this is how the three skills, one example of how these three skills kind of support each other and how they can benefit when you're playing.
Yeah, it's interesting just thinking about the different sports, and not only different sports, but moments within a sport where you have the opportunity to be thinking about these things if needed, right? Like for some people, I'm going to say it's maybe best in sports we say, well, just be dumb, don't think. But there are certain moments, baseball, golf, tennis, you have these natural pauses where there's actually sometimes maybe too much time to think, and that can be a negative, versus the flow of a basketball game, outside of maybe free throws or these brief pauses. I guess it's happening, but it's happening really, really quickly, or it's absent, this idea of mindfulness. What's your take on that, like with a sport that is more fast-paced?
Yeah, perfect. So if you remember like what mindfulness is, these three skills, at no point in time did we say thinking. When you are mindful, you are not trying to think. That is a different part of the brain. So basically the default mode network, certain brain regions that are in charge of rumination, self-reflection, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, and so forth, right? When you are practicing mindfulness, meaning you are using these three skills on purpose, you are engaging what is called the experiential network of the brain. That is that part of the brain that is in charge of experiencing the senses, including your mind. You can be aware of your thoughts, or you can be aware of tension or relaxation. You can be aware of where the ball is and if it should be there. But at no point in time, when somebody is trying to be mindful, are they trying to think intellectually. That is not what you're doing when you're mindful, even though, as an athlete, of course you need to think sometimes, because you need to think strategically, right? What is the next thing that I should do? Or you need to think through analysis. What did I just do wrong and what can I adapt? Okay, so now you are thinking, but this analysis or strategic thinking is not mindfulness.
So when you are taking on a new athlete or beginning to work with a new athlete, and your working relationship starts with them, how are you identifying strengths and weaknesses within these three pillars, right? How do you identify which ones they are strong at out of the three and which ones will need some work? Is that through questioning? Is that through observing? Like, what's your process of analysis?
Yeah, so basically it's self-reporting based on their practice. Okay, so most of the time when somebody starts practicing and wants to integrate mindfulness, they start because there's something that they feel like they could optimize. So there's some degree of interest, right? They feel like something with their mind, whatever that is not optimal. So now, when you feel like it's not optimal, whatever that might be, you don't even have the language yet. You might be just, I'm just too anxious sometimes before matches, or like it's so hard for me to focus, or I just like don't know how to deal with like high pressure moments, right? And it kind of ends there. They don't have a lot of more detail. It's just like there's an issue, I don't know what to do, and now what? Okay, so after that, the first step is really to explain and teach the athlete what those skills are, kind of what we're doing right now, and then have them practice the skills. This talking, like mindfulness practice, is not cognitive therapy or psychotherapy. It is, but I need to use language in order to explain to you what you need to do. Just like I need to use words to explain to you how to hit a forehand. I could demonstrate it also, but maybe it's not going to communicate all the subtlety. So once there is a basic understanding of what to do, enough so they can attempt to use these skills, and hopefully they will also start to see how they have already been using the skills in part, just not in a strategic way, then you start to report back. They start to report back. Okay, I tried to do this and this, what you said, and this is challenging for me, or this I don't understand, and I don't know how to do this. And then you go into these reports and say, okay, so in this situation, the next time you are serving and you're noticing you're getting more anxious before the serve and you're distracted, you can do X. And doing X is basically using these three skills in a certain way. And there's many different ways to use these three skills. And the athlete has to basically do two things. On the one side, they have to start using these skills so they improve over time. But on the other side, they also need to experiment with different strategies to figure out which technique and which strategy works for them. Because not every technique will be the right one for the same.
Yeah, and they probably naturally, if they're at a high level, probably do some of these things really well already. They're just not aware that that is mindfulness, or maybe
Exactly.
they are, but it's more so about refining those skills because they're up there, they're at a high level for a reason, right? So if you're willing, let's use me as an example, I guess. I told you I like playing golf. When I go to a nice country club or I go to a really nice course, I feel a bit anxious. I'm not alone in that. Why? Because I want to play really well at a nice course that I paid for. I don't know why. The impact of my play has no impact on anything in the world. I have really nothing to lose. I just want to have an enjoyable experience there. So off of the first tee, like many, I feel myself getting a little ramped up, even though it probably doesn't matter in my life. But when I go and play a really casual round by myself, I feel very relaxed and I often end up playing much better.
Yeah, exactly. So
help me.
First off, right, for you to understand is like whatever technique we will have you try the next time you play golf might not work. Just like, let's say, you have the ability to swim, but if the waves are too high, you're not good enough at swimming yet, and you will drown anyway. Right. So in order to be able to swim in these kind of waves, you need to swim more, train more, so you can handle these bigger waves without drowning. Okay, as a metaphor. So in the same situation...
You're telling me I stink at golf and you can't help me with that.
No, it's just, it depends on how intense is this nervousness or anxiety that you're experiencing, and your mindfulness skills might not be able yet, without training, to manage this degree of intensity. If the degree is lower, it might. But we don't know. I'm just saying, just because you're going to use this set of skills in a certain way and it doesn't work, doesn't mean it's wrong or you can't do it. It's just your skill hasn't trained enough. Okay?
Right.
So let me ask you, what is the situation exactly when you are getting nervous? Like, take me into that moment. Where are you standing? What are you doing?
Usually when I'm warming up, I'll be hitting the ball just fine. I'm on the range, right? A couple steps away from maybe the first tee. I'll hit one poorly. I'm not very good, but I'm an amateur, so every now and then I hit one really, really poorly. And I'm like, oh man, that wasn't great. And that's a negative thought that appears. And now that negative thought is in my head as I start to swing. And I think more about the previous poor swing that I took and less about just like enjoying my environment and where I am. I find that when I am relaxed, I do play very well. When I'm not, like anybody else, I probably tense up and all of a sudden mechanics don't feel right. I don't know what really I'm thinking.
But you're still in the driving range? You're warming up, or are you already now on the tee?
Yeah, warming up. It typically happens around then. I actually found out that if I don't warm up, I tend to play a lot better. I just go out and hit, and I kind of just stop warming up because I'll be warming up just fine, and it's one shot, and all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, bad thought. And now I'm thinking about, really, I don't know what I'm thinking about. My mind just starts going kind of fast,
Great. Okay. So now tell me, when you are playing well, okay, before you made that mistake, what are you paying attention to? What are you focused on?
Usually enjoying my environment. I'm not really thinking about.
No, not thinking. But like what you're thinking about is just like either words in your head or images in your head. But when you're playing golf, you are going to be focusing maybe on watching the ball, on your posture, on your technique, right? On how relaxed you are or where you're supposed to be aiming, a technical cue, right? Anything that you're paying attention to when you're actually swinging, when you're about to hit the golf ball on the driving range, when you're feeling relaxed and everything is going well.
Yeah, usually my body positioning, just where the ball is, where my feet is, like how close I am to the ball, where my head is in relation to the ball. Am I standing tall? Am I slightly hunched over? Am I too far away? Am I sticking my butt out? A couple of things like that, and I really focus more on body positioning, I would say.
Okay, great. So you're focused
relative to the ball, yeah.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so you're focused on posture relative to the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm assuming you're not like rehearsing that in your head, saying like, oh, my feet need to be in this position and you do it. It's more like you just feel it. You feel it, maybe you see it in your mind.
It's a lot more feel. And I find that if something goes off, then I start thinking about that a little more detailed.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So when you play well, you are focused on feeling your body. And what you are trying to feel is a certain kind of feeling which you experience if you are in the right posture.
Right.
Is that correct so far?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, good. Now, so we know where your attention is. Your body.
Yeah. Definitely.
We know what you are aware of, which is posture relative to the body. Second skill. You're doing that already. And are you equanimous? Are you allowing things to be as they are? Yes, relatively easy in that moment because you are relaxed, meaning there's nothing, you're not overthinking things yet, you're not nervous, right? So it's relatively easy to be equanimous if there's nothing that you dislike and nothing that you are like worried to lose.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So all three skills are active in that moment. Okay? Now, you make a mistake once or twice. Now, where does your attention go? You already were saying it.
Yeah, I start to overanalyze my body positioning.
And how do you do that? Are you still feeling? Or analyzing means what?
I'm really trying to like assess more than feel and have a better idea of like, okay, is my foot like perfectly aligned? Are my toes pointed forward? Like I actually start to think about my upper body then and think about like, am I actually rotating my body at all or am I not? And when I'm hitting the ball well, I'm not thinking about that. When I am hitting it poorly, I'm actually consciously thinking about, am I rotating my shoulders?
Perfect. Okay, great. So now, when you're playing well, you're focused on feeling and you're aware of a certain kind of feeling, like we said. And when you start playing badly, you are focused on your thoughts. You're not focused on feeling anymore at all, right? And you are now analyzing. So you're not actually tracking anymore. You're more like lost in the thought. Which, obviously, also we have to point out, is not generally wrong. If you make a mistake, it's okay to analyze to a degree, like, is there something that I did wrong? You recap for a moment, and now you realize, yes, my foot was turned out too much, or my head was too far behind, let's just say, okay? Now, with that piece of information, knowing that, you thought for a moment, you analyzed, now you want to return your attention back to the body and back to being aware of your posture relative to the ball, including the two new pieces that you figured out through your analysis, your head posture and your foot, let's just say. But now you need to feel it. You're not thinking about that anymore. That thought just helped you to try to notice that. So now you need to notice that. But because you made a mistake, there's a new experience present for you. you now also have a feeling of nervousness maybe in the chest. And you might still be thinking. Okay? You cannot turn your thoughts off with a snap of a finger.
Right.
But just because there are thoughts and your mind is thinking, that doesn't mean you need to focus on your thoughts. That would be the same thing as saying, I can only focus on hitting the golf ball if there is no one talking behind me. It's a voice that you hear behind you, but you can still focus on feeling your body. And just as much, if you have thoughts in your mind, you don't have to pay attention to them. You can learn to pay attention to what you need to, even though you are thinking. But there's no focus on thinking. Nor are you trying to fight the thoughts. You're not trying to get rid of them. If I'm thinking, I can't play. If that's your go-to, you're already done the moment you start thinking. So you start to change your relationship with your thoughts. You're like, okay, that's what the mind is there for. The mind is there to think. And now I return my attention. So you allow those thoughts. You allow the feeling that might be unpleasant if it's there. And you want to return your awareness and concentration back to exactly that, where it is when you play well. And already you are doing a mindfulness practice in that moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So now, easier said than done. Your mind might have so much power over you, these thoughts, that they hijack your attention.
Right.
You will now try to pay attention to your body, but every second or two, your attention goes back to your thoughts and you get lost in your thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the waves are too high for that moment. But that means still you will try. That's the practice. Practicing doesn't mean doing it perfectly. Practicing means you're trying to do something you can't do perfectly, and you do it over and over time it will improve.
Okay. That's very helpful. Next time I go out there, I'm going to shoot you a text.
Yes,
say,
exactly.
Hey, just had a super intrusive thought. Acknowledge it and moving on.
Yes, exactly. And the moving on, remember, does not mean that the thought disappears. It means allowing the thought and paying attention to something that you want, regardless of the thought being present.
Got it. Okay. So when we get now into skill building, okay, and we try to pick out specific elements of skills, how do we make it specific to that person's environment and background and upbringing? Like, how do you break down? Let's dive into number 2, which is awareness and clarity, ability to track, what you're experiencing, this detection and distinguishing. What's the next breakdown there of sub-skills?
So the breakdown of the sub-skills is basically you're working on that all the time. It's not like first one and then the other. It always depends on just the situation that you're in. And the same thing with the breakdown of concentration. So concentration has this basically division into sustained attention, meaning paying attention to something for a long time. Then the opposite of that, which is momentary attention, paying attention to something for a short time. Selective attention, which is your ability to pay attention to something if you need to make a choice between 2 or more relevant objects of concentration. And then 4, which we just talked about, executive attention, which is your ability to pay attention to what you want when there is a distraction. And the distraction is not just external, but the distraction can be your thought or your feeling. And you learn to pay attention to something even though there is a force pulling at your attention. So you work on, and then the sub-skill of detection and discernment is the 2 divisions within awareness. And which sub-skill you are kind of working on will always be determined by the situation that you find yourself in. You can't force necessarily all of these sub-skills to work. So let's say you are playing golf, which is the same example. Yeah. There is no distraction. Well, okay, there is no way for you to work on executive attention in that moment. But the moment you start to get distracted, rather than looking at that as an issue, as like, now I'm distracted again, you can actually turn this into a positive. This is an opportunity for you to work on the sub-skill of executive attention, because you can only improve that if there is something distracting you. And this is how we individualize the practice for each athlete. So now, once somebody starts practicing and they start reporting exactly what you reported, right? Just in their sport, and playing tennis, and it's before the match, or it's during the change of ends. And they're saying like, this is what's going on, but this is what I would want to go on, and I don't know how to solve this. We break it down. Okay, what are you experiencing? What is challenging for you? And where do you think, by your own experiences, your attention should be? You knew it. I just had to ask 3-4 questions. You knew if you're playing well, I'm paying attention to my body. I'm feeling it. I'm not analyzing it. So like with every other player, they have that knowledge. They understand that. Yeah, if things are going well, this and this is happening. And if you talk about it a little bit, they have like a very good way to describe it. And then you start to kind of give them a goalpost. They're like, now I understand what I need to try to do, even if I can't do it yet. So I'm sitting on the bench between games, and now I'm just thinking about like how I messed up the last game and the mistake that I made in order to get broken. And now you notice those thoughts, and you turn your attention to the body, the feeling of relaxation. Would be one technique. You anchor your attention away from an unpleasant experience. But there's an infinite amount of other techniques. And the way you start to tailor the technique to the individual athlete is then really by experimenting. There is no way that somebody will tell me every situation that they're in perfectly, and then that will result in me knowing, oh, that is the technique that will be perfect for you. I could not know. They need to figure that out. And the reality is that there is probably not one technique that will work all the time, even in the same situation. It might work a few times, and maybe after a week or a month or a year, they need to switch it a little bit. So the real kind of key to unlock is not to learn 3, 4, 5 different techniques that are like, hopefully this is it. And instead you need to learn to create your own techniques. So you are adaptable and malleable in every moment. You're not so rigid anymore.
Yeah, do you find that when athletes start speaking to you, you have 2 groups or 2 buckets? You have those that tend to think a lot and those that tend to feel, like when they describe what they're feeling versus thinking, or it could just be a mixture?
Yeah, all three. Yeah. I mean, some people feel like everything is in their head. Yeah. Because all of their attention is there. The reality is everybody is experiencing everything mostly, right? Of course, some people get more anxious, other people get more angry, other people are calmer in general, right? I mean, everybody has different nervous systems and reacts differently. But that being said, the fundamental principles still apply. Everybody is experiencing emotions, right? Everybody reacts in some shape or form. And then the question is just, but what experience is drawing their attention? So if one group of athletes might mostly pay attention to what's going through their head, and they hardly ever notice what's going on in their body. Right. Not because nothing is going on, it's just they don't pay attention to it. So it seems like nothing is going on and it's all in their head. And then the flip side is true too. Some people are just paying attention to what they're feeling. They're very interoceptively aware, right? But they're not very aware of their thought processes. And so their mind doesn't seem like that big of an issue, but what they feel is a huge issue. Like, I get so anxious, the feeling is so terrible, right? Yeah. That like I can't handle it. And then there is a very big group in the middle that notices both, but sometimes more the mind, sometimes more what they feel.
Can you go into detail a little bit about the impact that mindfulness can have on enhancing recovery?
Yeah, so with recovery, There's like two big kind of buckets within recovery, I would say, right? One is just like the recovery from intensity. Like you're breaking your body down on purpose with every training session. And now how can you enhance recovery? So your body is at a state where you can kind of break it down again. And then there's the recovery from injury. You actually injured your body structurally, and now you have a break of a week or 3 months after, 9 months after an ACL surgery or something like that. So let's talk about like the general recovery first. Okay, you're not actually injured. So in that case, we know that the most effective way to recover, the most important, is sleep. Without sleep, you're done so, basically. How does mindfulness help sleep? First, there needs to be an issue with sleep, some kind, right? Either you just have trouble sleeping in general, or that's one thing. So mindfulness is very helpful in certain cases there, and we can talk about that. And then the other one is you don't have a general issue with sleeping, you just don't have a good sleep hygiene. Like your behavior impacts negatively your sleep routine, and therefore you don't sleep so well. Because you drink too much alcohol, or you look too much on your doom scrolling before you're going to sleep, or when you wake up, you go on your phone, and read emails from your boss that's upset, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So in either case, mindfulness shows up there because when you're supposed to sleep, you intellectually understand sleeping would be right. But you're doing something that is making your sleep worse. Most of the time, you will be doing something that you want to be doing. There is a desire to look at the phone, right? There is a desire to stay out and drink with your friends and go to bed later. It's not that you don't understand that doing this activity isn't good for you. It's just you don't prioritize the sleep. You want to have fun right now, or you want to do this. Again, not because you don't like sleeping. You don't have an aversion towards sleeping. You just have a very strong desire towards this one activity that just happens to interfere with sleeping. So, the third skill that we were talking about was allowing experiences to exist, right? Without clinging to them if they are pleasant, without suppressing them if they are unpleasant. So if there is let's go very simple, I'm in bed, okay, I even planned on going to sleep right now, and I look at my phone, and now I open up social media and I sleep, and I just want to scroll. You can notice this desire. You do not need the desire to disappear in order to be able to put the phone down. Just like you don't need the thought of analysis of your golf swing to disappear in order to pay attention to feeling the body. But in either case, that requires this third skill, your ability to try to be okay with the thought and to try to be okay with like the urge to look at your phone. So there is an urge, there is the desire to look at your phone. But with more mindfulness, you start to be able to do things that you understand are good for you in the future, even though in this very second, they're unpleasant. So it's basically delayed gratification. With more mindfulness, you're not acting exclusively anymore on desire and aversion. I want it, I do it, disregarding the consequences. And I don't want it, I'm not doing it, also regardless of the consequences. And with mindfulness, you start to be able to do more of the things that are good for you, whether they are pleasant right now or you don't like them so much, right? And vice versa, you start to be able to do fewer of the things that are not so good for you, even though you really like it, but you understand it's not helpful. But, I mean, everybody has that understanding. Everybody in the world who smokes knows it's not good to smoke. Everybody who really sleeps badly knows not sleeping enough isn't good for their energy the next day and for many other things. Everybody who drinks a lot of alcohol understands intellectually it's not good for me. But it doesn't matter.
Most people.
To the degree, right? But that is like also a perfect kind of example of how your intellectual understanding of things is not sufficient. It doesn't equal skills. Explaining to somebody how they need to do a bench press, or explaining how they need to swing the golf club, or me explaining how to do a serve, doesn't mean I can do it better than them. I was just giving this example to another client the other day. Like, I know more intellectually than any current pro on the tour. I know more about the forehand, how it works, biomechanically, how to teach it, what it does, all the nuances. And I have a good forehand, and I've played tennis for many years, but my forehand is not as good as anybody on the tour right now. So what you understand intellectually and what you are able to do, it is not directly correlated. It's just supportive in the best case scenario, right?
Right.
So in the same case, this is where mindfulness comes in for recovery, for sleep. I know, I understand this is not good for me, but just because I know it, it's not enough. I need to be able to develop this ability to allow the things that I really want to do, but I know they're not good for me, to be there. Okay, so there is this desire, and I don't have to act on it. Not only if the desire isn't there anymore. That's what everybody is trying to, not everybody, but a lot of people, solution is get rid of the desire. Then I'm free. That's not the real freedom. The real freedom is whether the desire is there or not, and you are not forced to act on it, then you are really free.
Yeah, thank you for providing insight on that. And one thing I was thinking about as you were talking was ultimately, as athletes or as high performers, we always experience frustration. And frustration is inevitably something that you will go through during the course of your performance. So how do you work with those emotions of frustration? How do you implement mindfulness to combat those feelings, or to get you back into a place where you can perform at a high level?
Yeah, great. I mean, frustration is very interesting, actually, because frustration is in no shape or form a bad thing, actually. Frustration essentially means you care, you want to achieve something, you're trying to do it, it's not happening. And if you care about it, and what you care about isn't happening the way you want it, a natural reaction to that will be that you're frustrated. So, no issue so far, right? Mm-hmm. The issue becomes when you act on your frustration, meaning, or rather I should say, you react to your frustration, and this reaction is not in your best interest. If your reaction is in your best interest, then not even that is a bad thing. So that we have to kind of uncouple that from one another. Mm-hmm. So first thing, frustration is not a bad thing, okay? It can be good, and it can be not so good for you. One of the beneficial elements of frustration is actually, I think Huberman talked about that very kind of eloquently in one of his millions of episodes, is how frustration is really an essential part of the learning process. So when you start to do something that you're not so good at, you make mistakes, right? And by making mistakes, your brain enters a mode of plasticity. So once your brain is in a mode of plasticity, meaning it can change and adapt based on your experience, you can now basically start learning more effectively. If you now get frustrated while you're making these mistakes, the benefit to that is that once you do get it right, there will be an increased release of dopamine and epinephrine, and that is beneficial for your learning process. So the only time frustration is a negative, so to speak, for your performance is if frustration results in you either quitting or starting to do things that are really not good for your performance. But other than that, if you are frustrated and you kind of hang in there and you, once again, allow the frustration, you understand the benefits of frustration in the long term, you can get to the point where you enjoy being frustrated because you know how good it will be for you. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. I can't wait to rewire myself and experience a little bit of frustration. Yes, I'm frustrated. Let's go.
Exactly.
That's how I'm going to start reacting.
Yes.
Just the thought, feeling of frustration.
Yes.
Fascinating. So, okay, a lot to chew on here, a lot of great things you've shared, and I'm already thinking about myself, my previous performances, where I could have used some of this and how I can use this moving forward in my recreational golf game. Could you share, I mean, I know you work with a lot of athletes now, especially those on tour like you had mentioned. Can you maybe share, is there a story or two regarding mindfulness, this implementation of mindfulness that you constantly go back to or that you think about as like a success story or something you'd want to share?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories actually, because we're also writing the book right now. The part of the book is many stories like that. Maybe I will start with a story where Mike, who I'm writing the book with, his very first match that he played on tour in singles was at the US Open against Agassi, who was, you're talking about Agassi, and he was his big idol,
Right.
And he plays him, he's young, center court, full stadium, and he was so anxious and so nervous that he basically didn't pay any attention to playing the match. All he was paying attention to was how John McEnroe was kind of watching him and commentating and thinking about what John McEnroe thought about how he was playing. Was he doing a good job? Right? And then all of a sudden, 4 games later, he's like, oh, he was just playing on autopilot and thinking about everything and totally mind wandering while playing tennis. Okay? While it was the most horrific experience of his life because he was so anxious and so nervous that after the first set he was totally drained and basically couldn't run anymore.
Right.
The success story of this is that this was such a horrific experience for him. And this was going on for 4 days because he saw the draw playing against Agassi 4 days before he played the match. And for 4 days, he was freaking himself out, like, what is he going to do, and this and that. And his coach is telling him, like, you have to focus on this, you have to be positive, right? And everything that he did was just, like, failing miserably. Without this experience, though, without 4 days of suffering and struggling and playing on the biggest stage in the tennis world against the biggest tennis player at that time, made him realize, wow, I mean, his mind is really out of control. If something starts to matter to him so much, it doesn't matter how good he's at tennis. He can't play. He's like below 50% capacity basically at that moment. And it resulted in him being so motivated to develop his mind that he started to meditate for the next 30 years, slowly, progressively increasing it. And now there's a few players that have been meditating, in all the sports. We've heard about it. Djokovic has talked about it. But, I mean, this is a little hypothetical, but we know a lot of players and off players, of course. I don't think there is a single tennis player in the world, in the history of tennis, that has meditated more than Mike. He has now meditated for 30 years, somewhere between 1 to 4 hours a day, training his mind, spending the same amount of time developing his mind that he has spent developing his body and his technical and strategical skills. And it's a very inspiring story, very kind of funny and eye-opening. And so I hope that if we communicate that well enough also in the book, that people will kind of see themselves in it, like everything that he has experienced, in part, they have experienced. And if he was able to kind of pull through that basically anybody can.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that feeling was like. He probably was on another planet. Didn't even realize he was playing a tennis match.
He was.
Yeah. So I've come to learn too that you're now teaching as a professor a course on mindfulness at USC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little about that course and just like this opportunity? And
Yes, that's great. Actually, when I started integrating mindfulness into tennis around like 15 years ago or so, and I kind of made that my main focus. Tennis was my focus my whole life, and then I started practicing mindfulness for myself, kind of really noticing like all the weaknesses of myself, and also like Mike, basically being motivated to change those once I realized this is actually possible, right? Because I learned about it, heard about it. And then I started teaching it. My big goal, like big dream of mine, was to incorporate that into universities. Because I kind of did the mindfulness training at UCLA. One of my first attempts was incorporating mindfulness for athletes in UCLA, but that kind of like a little difficult in universities in general. Because of the politics, and it's complicated, kind of like a lot of people involved. And then many years later, I get approached by Linda Yaren Weston, who kind of started the mindfulness course at USC as like a 2-unit elective. And she brought me in because she had heard of me incorporating into sports, and there's just not that many people doing that. Most people are kind of focused on people really having a hard time, suffering, kind of just some kind of a disorder. And my focus was more like, there's a lot of people doing that, but I also want to focus on people who just love what they're doing and they want to use mindfulness to improve what they're already doing. Not only because you feel like you've hit rock bottom. And she liked that so much that she said, well, once you come into the university, like maybe hopefully at one point there will be the opportunity to launch your own course for athletes also. And now, a few years later, so that was last year, 3 semesters ago, I started the first Introduction to Mindfulness with Athletic Performance course at USC, which has never existed there. And now I'm teaching 3 courses on that. And I love it. It's that population of like young students, and their twists and being open is one of my favorite things I do. It really is like a great group of people, and I'm there with them, sharing with them what's possible, things that they don't know about yet, and it has a great impact on them. So,
yeah, that's really cool.
Good.
That's really exciting, and I'm glad that you have that opportunity and to start having these conversations with people who are maybe interested in performance, younger athletes, even just younger populations, where, hey, maybe they don't even go into sport in the future, but it's something they're just conscious of with their own life experiences. Outside of that, I think there's a broader application to that. I have just like 1 or 2 more questions. Actually, one I was thinking about, which I should have followed up with, was if you could go back to that moment with Mike versus Agassi, and you could have a moment to talk with Mike in the middle of that match, what would you have said to him, or how would you have helped him if you were on the sideline there and you had a chance to say something to him?
Great. I think then we're going back to the ocean waves. Like, he was in a tsunami. There is probably nothing. I mean, one cannot know until one is in the moment. Most likely, I think the best potential effect one could have had is if somebody would have been around him that he knows well, that actually is mindful. That because it emanates, just like how somebody, if they get very, very nervous, right? And they're an important person to you, and you're like, you're so nervous, you're freaking me out. It like affects you. It's the opposite way also. If you have somebody around you where these 3 skills are noticeably elevated, and you are very, very nervous and you're anxious, and you have somebody around you who's just totally cool, like, okay, so you're nervous, like, I'm not trying to convince you to get rid of it. I think that is one of the things that could have been very effective. Another thing that could have been very effective is breathing protocols. They definitely they're very effective, but they're also limited. If you're experiencing such a heightened state of arousal and you are emotionally and psychologically completely overwhelmed, and you can't remove yourself from that situation. It's just, you got to suffer. You're going to go through it. And then the best thing that can happen is if you learn from it. And that is what he did. So yeah, I would have probably not said that much. I would have given him some simple tools, breathing. And I've been with him and just being like, it's okay, not overanalyze and analytically explain to him how he doesn't have to be identified with his mind and, you know, he can turn his attention somewhere else. That's like in those moments, it's not going to be it.
I probably would have said something like, remember, if you're frustrated, this is a good thing. It's what you do with it. Okay, and then as you assess all the athletes you've worked with, you look at these top performers, and you look at these top performers with your mindfulness glasses on. Is there one trait, one of these three pillars, one skill in particular that stands out where you say, these people that tend to be successful, of course, there's a technical aspect to it and tactical, but is there one aspect that you see high performers, they share this one skill that they do particularly well?
Yeah, I mean, it's really from a mindful lens, right? Not the physical aspect of it and the strategical aspect. Generally, what they share is that they have a natural, if they haven't developed these skills like in a systematic way because they trained them knowingly, doesn't mean they didn't train them. It was just more intuitive, but their intuitive approach still was effective. So these skills improve.
Right.
And you can hear it over and over and over with the most successful athletes. They are very equanimous. It doesn't mean that when they lose, it doesn't sting. Just take now Sinner. He lost the French Open. Like, that is one of the most heartbreaking losses in tennis history, probably. And he acknowledged that. He doesn't pretend it's not hurting him, but he's like, but it's okay. This is going to hurt for a while, right? This means like a few weeks at least. But it's okay. That is equanimity in action. He is acknowledging it, accepting it, but now turning his attention to what can I do next? While I am sad or while I am very frustrated or upset about this loss of what happened, I allow it to be there, but I don't fight it. I'm not trying to get rid of it early, right? Or dwelling in it for weeks and weeks and months. And when you listen back to Serena and when you listen to Anasimova, who lost the Wimbledon final, right? I don't even know what it was, 6-love, 6-love, or 6-1, 6-love or something. Yeah. And then how she kind of approached that loss and what she took away from it. Or Nadal, or, I mean, so many athletes. You can hear and see and feel, even though it's a little bit more challenging through like just the screen, but you can sense how, yeah, this stings, but they're okay. They are learning to allow and accept failure, loss, emotional unpleasantness, of sadness, frustration, anxiety, fear, as part of the process. It's part of it. And that elevates your ability to move in the right direction and not get stuck tremendously. And you can see the flip side for athletes that are very good. They have a lot of potential physically, strategically. Let's say like Kyrgios, okay, was a good example. He would get very, very upset and he would react to being upset. And often this was not in his best interest. It didn't help his performance, right? So that is definitely one of a few things from a mindful perspective, what differentiates like the top from the greats, you know, let's even say. Nobody can say Kyrgios wasn't a great tennis player, but there's still a difference, right? And it's not the forehand, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. What I hear from you is like there's this ability to dissociate the performance, the frustration, and like acknowledge it, and then move on.
Yes, exactly, right? Exactly. And the moving on doesn't mean that it disappears, the frustration. Right. The moving on really refers to you allowing it and paying attention to something else that is relevant right now, that's helpful to you.
Yeah, moving forward, right? Even though you're carrying that, behind you, moving forward with it. Yeah, super cool. It's fun. I love hearing athletes, you know, talk about their performance afterwards. I love the post-game talk, especially in individual sports. Because it's only them. They're responsible for their performance. Scottie Scheffler's been a great example on the golf side of things, talking about, you know, not only how he talks about failure, but how he talks about success. He's like, success is a very fleeting feeling. Like, he goes, yeah, you celebrate after 4 days and you're like, okay, you're on to the next thing and it's gone. He's like, you only get a few moments to celebrate and then you're like thinking about the next thing. Like,
Yes, exactly right.
and he talked about his struggles with enjoying success. I mean, this is the most successful golfer in a very long time. And he's like, yeah, I don't even really know how to enjoy this experience because it's just on to the next thing. So it's been cool. But he's done a great job being able to dissociate like himself as a person from himself as a golfer, which has been kind of unique. But okay, well, cool. So Christian, for anyone who wants to learn more about mindfulness, for anyone who wants to follow what you're doing, the work that you're involved in, where can they go to learn more or to follow you?
Yeah, so I have an online course that you can take for athletes. That's called Mind Size Sports, mindsizesports.com. That's definitely one option that you have. Otherwise, if you're not so interested in mindfulness in sports and it's just mindfulness in general, right, then something I recommend is called Unified Mindfulness. These are all like online platforms, just for accessible for everyone at a very low cost.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's like a lot of people that in person you can go to, but I'm not going to recommend that since people are like all over the place. So I don't know all the places in the world.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah. Make sure that we put those in the episode notes so that people can see that. And if someone wants to reach out to you, maybe they have some questions or
yes, yeah, they can.
Media.
I mean, I'm not very on my website.
Okay.
Straka.la. You can get a hold of me. Basically, I'm not like I have social media accounts, but I'm not like really active. Maybe if you guys post something, I will repost, but that's probably the first time in like 4 years or so. But yeah, over my website, and there is an email link, and so anybody can reach out to me.
Yeah, you're going to be in bed doom scrolling, and you're going to say, I know looking at this Keiser post of me talking, this is the best thing for me right now, but I'm going to do it. Christian, thank you so much for joining me today on the Keiser Human Performance Podcast. We really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure catching up with you to hear all the great things that you're doing, the impact you're making on, people's lives, not just in performance, but people outside of performance as well. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and I can't wait to catch up with you soon.
Awesome. Likewise, Gabe. It was awesome talking to you.